Tuesday night means question and answer night. And a few questions have come in. The first of which is, Ajahn, what brings up the defilements? Is it an external force? Certainly seems like it sometimes, doesn't it? Mental defilement. The Buddha's word is kilesa. And kilesa are those mental states rooted in greed, anger, delusion. And if you trace them back, you could say they all arise from avijja. Vicca means knowledge, avijja means lack of knowledge, no knowledge. So ignorance or unawareness is the cause of mental defilements arising. But mental defilements in themselves, they're, we say, conditions of mind that arise into the mind or with the mind and then disappear again. So they're not a person, we say they're not self. They're like temporary visitors to the mind. So when the conditions are right, greed arises. Because of a lack of awareness, we don't realize that greed, as an example of a defilement, is a source of suffering. We don't see it. Or if we see it, we're not clear enough to let it go. So when the conditions are right, greed arises. So what are the conditions? You see something desirable which may give rise to desire, greed. Something you desirable, so the obvious thing is something like food. You could smell the food, you could see the food, and of course you may taste the food. So defilements arise when there's sense contact. We have our 5 external senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and then the mind itself is the 6th sense. So when there's sense contact, we get pleasure and pain, or sometimes neutral feeling arise. So dependent on sense contact, feeling arises, and perception also arises. So that's the way we interpret our experience and how we remember things. So it's the value and the importance we give to what we see, what we hear, what we taste. And if there's unawareness, ignorance conditioning the mind, then pleasure, pleasant feelings stimulate some form of desire or greed. Unpleasant, painful feelings tend to stimulate some form of aversion or hatred or dislike. Neutral feelings, when there's unawareness, tend to condition delusion. So the mental defilements rooted in greed, anger and delusion and all their offshoots, such as jealousy, pride, conceit, attachment to different kinds of views, stubbornness, laziness, arrogance, different forms of hostility, and so on. They kilesas, mental defilements arise because there's a set of conditions come together. So seeing something, hearing something, or just thinking, remembering something, thinking of something. But when those conditions pass or change, then the kilesa fades. So as you're sitting right here listening to this talk, I hope you're not angry at this moment, this very moment. You may be. There may be things happening in your life that are making you angry, unfortunately, but hopefully at this very moment you're not angry. So that's just pointing out to you that the defilement of anger may have arisen in the past, but currently it's subsided. It's not arising. So the conditions are not there for anger to arise. You may be just around the corner, waiting to rear its ugly head when the conditions are right, but at the moment they're not, so you're not angry. That's proving to you that anger as a defilement is a conditioned thing which is temporary. It's like a temporary visitor to the mind, but it's gone at the moment, so it's obviously not part of the mind. It's not a fixed part of the mind. It's not a fixed self. It's not there all the time. It's temporary. And you can use that understanding to your advantage, because as you become more aware and contemplate and reflect on these things, well, you get to know greed, anger, delusion, and all the other kinds of suffering that come from defilement are temporary. What's temporary is not a self, it's a mental state that can be abandoned because it's not fixed, it's not permanent. They may reoccur, and that's part of the trickiness of defilements, is that they keep reoccurring. So it seems like they are permanent. It seems like they're always there, bothering us. So it seems like we're always stressed, suffering, worrying, afraid, angry, greedy. But as you practice mindfulness, that helps to reveal the truth to you, and you become more clear that defilements arise and pass away. They're temporary and they're therefore not self. But if we do nothing about them, they keep bringing us suffering, because that's what mental defilements do. They bring suffering as an experience. So greed is bringing you suffering, because when you hold on to mental states of greed and you identify with them, you're agitated. Because greed by its nature, it's hunger, isn't it? You're hungry for something that you haven't got. So you feel ill at ease. And even when you get what you want, the object of your greed, because the object of your greed is temporary, the feeling of pleasure is temporary, then it stimulates more greed and more wanting and seeking and more discontent, because the objects of greed can never ultimately satisfy us all the time. So we keep falling into greed over and over again and always want more. Or if we get what we want, then we're worried that we're going to lose it, because we've seen it disappear before, so we're worried it will disappear on us again. So greed even stimulates a lot of fear, anxiety that we'll lose what we've got. Will we be able to keep our status, this pleasure, this happiness that we've got, these good things that we've got, or are they going to disappear on us? So it stimulates fear, it stimulates aversion. When you don't get what you want, you're unhappy, or you've got what you want but you're worried it's going to fade out on you, you're angry sometimes. So anger is very closely linked to greed. Why do we get angry? It's because we are facing something that we don't want. An unpleasant feeling has arisen because some situation or some person has triggered this. And that's why you might feel that mental defilements are coming from some external force. But actually, when you practice meditation and cultivate mindfulness and investigate more closely, you're seeing kilesas arise in your mind. When the conditions are there, they arise. And the external part of that, the sight, the sound, the feeling, it's part of the conditioning process, but the kilesa is your kilesa, for want of a better word or way of describing it. We say kilesas are not self, but on the conventional level we say there's a person and I'm experiencing anger or greed or desire or frustration or whatever it is. So we say there's a person experiencing defilement. But even if someone else has helped to trigger this defilement, it's not that they're the force of the defilement, they're only a factor. The defilement is yours, it's arising in your mind. And it has to be abandoned in your mind. So even though they seem like they're stimulated by some external force, it's actually just a set of causes and conditions coming together. And the real bottom line of it is unawareness, ignorance. So if you're angry, the place to remedy anger is in your mind, not out there with some external person. That doesn't mean to say you may not have things you have to do out there with people and situations out there. But actually to end anger as experience, that has to take place in your mind by recognizing where you're holding on, identifying with the defilement, having enough clarity to see that and then let it go. Wisdom is that quality that sees defilement as a cause of suffering and then abandons it, doesn't want it. Once you've identified it, it's like Ajahn Kalyano, you've got a thorn in your foot. Causes you pain. The only way you're going to stop having pain is pull the thorn out. But you've got to recognize that. If you keep walking, treading on the thorn because you're a bit lazy to pull it out, well, you're going to keep experiencing pain. If you keep getting caught into your greed, your desires that take over the mind, it's become obsessions, addictions, the endless wanting. If you do nothing about it, well, it'll keep causing you suffering. You have to do something about that. So maybe you see the impermanence of the object of your desire and you say, oh, this thing is only so good, it's impermanent, doesn't last. Then your mind tires of chasing after that object and so it starts to let go. And when mindfulness is strong and clear and continuous, then you might be able to just let go of desire rather than follow it. But this is going on internally, this is what we're doing in the practice. So to get rid of defilements, you can't go out into the world and try and make the world perfect, which is sometimes the approach people take. If I can make my life, my world perfect, then I'll have no reason to be greedy, angry. I'll just be totally content, blissful, happy. But it's impossible to do that. To abandon kilesa, defilement, you have to go inwards and learn how they're stimulated and how they're abandoned. So another question. I'm finding the practice very hard at the moment and finding life very low. I'm not sleeping at night and lay in bed for so long I lose track of time. My practice has taken a massive hit and I find myself drifting from the path. I know that this is impermanent, but I'm really struggling to just keep my head up. I'm a husband to a disabled wife, and both my children have little respect for me, and this is making me unhappy. But when I speak to them, they seem not to care. I work full-time, but still feel like a failure. Whatever I do, I don't have any time for myself. I recently took up fishing for my son, even though I know it's making bad karma for me. And being the only Buddhist in a Christian family, I'm looked at as an oddity. My wife humors my practice, allowing me to have my own Buddha and to make offerings of candles and incense, but she doesn't understand why I follow the Buddha's teaching. I have no local monastery or have any means to go to my closest, which is Amaravati, as I live more than 2 hours drive and don't drive and can't afford a taxi or catch the train. Being the only one earning an income, it is hard to find any money. Please, Ajahn, is there any advice I could get to help me back to the path? At one point I looked at ordaining as a monk, but with my family commitments I feel I couldn't. Well, you have our sympathy. Sounds like you have a few challenges there, but it's not a hopeless situation by any means. You know, the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path, has many factors, and we can develop many of them even when we're in a tricky situation like you've described. So if you're the income earner, the breadwinner, well, try first of all to practice right livelihood, so the way you earn your money, which I'm sure you may be already, you're earning it in a way where you're not breaking precepts, you're not exploiting others, you're not breaking the law. Practice right livelihood. That's a good start. Then I would recommend, when you do have time, I realize you're busy, but perhaps you can fit it in as you're doing other tasks. Listen to Dhamma. You know, now Dhamma is available on so many sources of different apps and YouTube and everything, and I would listen to Dhamma regularly to stimulate your wisdom and understanding of the path, what it is, how it will help you, what you have to do to practice. So listen to the Dhamma or read the Dhamma when you can. I wouldn't worry too much about other people not understanding your practice. That's a very common experience in non-Buddhist Western countries. It's, all of us have been through that. Our family doesn't understand. They think we have lost our way practicing Buddhism. Just focus on practicing the Buddhism that you understand and doing good things. If you can keep 5 precepts, that's great. So, the fishing thing, maybe you can go and sit there on the bank of the river with your fishing rod, but, forget to put any bait on the end of the hook. Just sit there and never catch anything. So it ends up a form of meditation. Maybe you could do that. Try and work around that one. So yes, try not to deliberately kill, but try and keep the 5 precepts if you can. That's already such a great gift to the world, to yourself, to others. And even if your kids don't listen to you, your wife doesn't understand you, your relatives don't understand you, never mind. You just focus on doing your practice in the best way you know how, because if you're really practicing what the Buddha taught, following this Noble Eightfold Path in whatever way you can, whatever amount of effort you can put in, You won't be harming anyone, you won't be creating negative karma, you'll be creating good karma. You have to trust in that and keep cultivating in whatever small ways you can, small or big ways. So, if you get a few minutes here and there in the day, just sit down and do a bit of breath meditation just to calm your mind, relax, let go. That's already a little victory, isn't it? Try to be mindful of your speech. When you're under pressure, be careful of what you say, because your stress will come out in your speech. Try to be very restrained when you're getting stressed, tired, angry. Try to practice metta, loving kindness, every day in your speech, your actions. And if you can do a bit of meditation on that theme regularly, that would be great. Listen to the Dhamma. This will help you to understand more how to look at the world skillfully, how to engage with the world skillfully, even in the midst of your challenging situation. And then maybe, in the course of a year, maybe you can find a couple of days, a day or a couple of days, or if you can, a week, say, where if you can set it up, I know this may be difficult in your situation, but if you could, set it up so you can go on a retreat. You said you once thought of ordaining as a monk. Well, go and spend 2 days, 5 days, 7 days, whatever time you can get together in a monastery like Amravati. Just go and join a formal retreat, or just go and stay there, helping out, doing some meditation, helping out, just for whatever time you can, even if it's only once a year. And then you get a boost to your practice and you go back home, you're refreshed, you can put effort into looking after your wife, your kids. Even if you can only go for a day once a year, that's better than nothing. You have to be modest in your expectations. Maybe if at the moment you have a lot of responsibilities, just accept that. Work within the limits of that situation. Maybe later, when your kids have grown up, your wife you've got different people who can help with your wife. Then maybe later you'll get more time for your own practice. But just try and work with what you're doing right now. Try and make the best of the situation you're in. Appreciate the good that you're doing, that other people are doing. And I always use this reflection in difficult situations, bring up the thought, it could be worse. However difficult it is, it could be worse. If you can see that, then you feel a bit better as you're trying to make head and tail of how to practice in your particular situation. So don't give up, keep going, and try to appreciate whatever good things you do have in your life. And we wish you every success with your practice. There's another question. Can Buddhists try to change their world for the better, or are we taught to just accept things as they are? Both. As we accept the way things are, we try to change things for the better. If that doesn't sound like a contradiction. Yeah, of course, Buddhists, like everyone else, can try to improve the world. But we do it starting with ourselves, because it's very difficult to improve the world, change the world for the better, if we haven't yet done much with ourselves. So, as you help other people, you help yourself. As you help yourself, you're able to help other people better. It starts there. If we put effort into learning the Dhamma, again, listening to the Dhamma regularly, maybe pick up a regular meditation practice, try to employ the 5 precepts every day, try your best to undertake to keep the 5 precepts, practice generosity, kindness in different ways, already your own state of mind will benefit from that and improve, and your own immediate world or immediate life situation will improve. You may be able to help people around you because you're keeping the precepts. That's already going to help whoever comes into contact with you, because you won't be hurting them with your speech, your actions. And then whatever energy you've got left from doing after practicing for yourself, then you can maybe devote that to improving the world. So, there are Buddhist people in politics or science or medicine or education or business, whatever line of work you go into, or in whatever area you can volunteer your time, you can change the world as much as you can according to your skills, your knowledge. But if you've already got a foundation in practice, you'll be interested or looking into ways to remove your suffering, as we've been talking about earlier, abandoning mental defilements, which come up all the time. But if you're already looking into that, then as you go out to help the world or change the world for the better, you have a good perspective, because rather than going out and getting angry with all the problems of the world and then adding to the problems of the world by getting angry or upset or depressed or sad because of what you see, what you're involved with, you already are learning to let go of some of these mental defilements, and so the help or the changes that you're trying to put into the world will be more effective, and you won't be adding to the suffering of the world. So, it could be, you can change the world on so many levels, can't you? If you're changing it as a spiritual practitioner, as a Dhamma practitioner, you can go out and teach people to meditate, teach the Dhamma, help them, support them in the Dhamma. You can help people in their whatever area of help, assistance they need, but using the Dhamma that you've practiced to guide you. So you may be volunteering or making donations or sharing your knowledge and skills, your time, your energy, but you'll be using the Dhamma to guide you, so you won't be doing things that harm others, or you'll be trying not to harm others. So you try not to take advantage or exploit people, you try not to act with bias, you try to encourage harmony, respect between people. All of this you get from your Dhamma practice, and you take that into whatever area of life that you're able to offer something to improve the world. You can be modest in your outlook, in your expectations, and just try and improve yourself and not harm others. That's already good for the world. If you can help people in larger numbers than that and in more direct ways than that, all the better. So if you have some skill, some knowledge that you can share with others, well, good. But you come from the point of view, the place of trying not to harm others, exploit others, hurt others. So you balance what you're doing to improve the world with practice of morality, moral integrity, mindfulness, using wisdom to remove your suffering and help others, support others in removing their suffering. So it could be on the material level, offering help to people, individuals or groups who are suffering. It could be on the spiritual level, giving support through the practice of compassion, kindness, wisdom in action. There's so much we can do. Best of all, who helps the world best or most, we would say, as Buddhists, is arahants, fully awakened arahants. The world needs more arahants. So that's one way you can change the world, because we need people who understand clearly the Four Noble Truths, understand what is suffering, what is its cause, they abandon the cause, they experience the cessation of suffering for themselves. They're such a valuable addition to the world. We need more of them. If there's an arahant around, they're such a blessing to the world. You meet them, they give you good advice, they give you a good feeling, they give you a good example. If you make merit with them, your merit is so powerful. Arahants are the most useful people to change this world. Imagine if everyone became an arahant, the world would change dramatically for the better. But if you can't achieve that yet, try and keep the 5 precepts, try and meditate, try and let go of your greed, anger and delusion in whatever way you can, and that's going to be helping the world. We need more of that. The last question tonight is in Thai, so I'll read it in Thai and talk in Thai, and then I'll give you a translation. กราบเรียนพระอาจารย์กราบเรียนถามข้าความหลงคืออะไรข้าราคะโลภะโกรธหลงพอเข้าใจแต่ความหมายของคำว่าหลงคืออะไรคะแล้วในทางปฏิบัติจะละความหลงคือทำยังไงใช่หลงการปล่อยวางไหมครับใช้หลักการปล่อยวางไหมครับหรือการไม่ยึดติดว่าเป็นของเราก็โดยสรุปใช่ความหลงเป็นสิ่งที่เราต้องปล่อยวางสิ่งที่ปล่อยวางความหลงก็คือมรรคเราเจริญมรรคมีองค์8ประการศีลสมาธิปัญญาเริ่มต้นด้วยสัมมาทิฏฐิความคิดเห็นถูกปัญญาแล้วก็ความเพียรสัมมาวายามะสติสัมมาสติสมาธิความนิ่งสงบจิตตั้งมั่นทุกข้ออริยมรรคมีองค์8ประการทุกข้อเจริญแล้วมันจะเป็นสิ่งที่ตรงข้ามกับความหลงความหลงลึกๆก็คืออวิชชาความไม่รู้ไม่เข้าใจในอริยสัจธรรมไม่รู้ว่าทุกข์คืออะไรเหตุให้เกิดทุกข์คืออะไรการดับทุกข์ยังไม่ได้สัมผัสข้อปฏิบัติที่จะดับทุกข์ยังไม่ได้พัฒนายังไม่ได้เจริญก็เลยความหลงจะทำลายด้วยศีลสมาธิปัญญาเราต้องทำให้มีขึ้นในใจต้องทำให้มากปฏิบัติให้มากความหลงมีหลายประเภทเนาะความโลภเกิดจากความหลงโลภนึกว่าสิ่งที่เราโลภที่เราอยากได้จะนำความสุขมาให้เรายังไม่เห็นโทษของสิ่งนั้นหรือความโลภมันมีโทษใช่ไหมผมจะทำให้จิตไม่สงบอยากได้สิ่งที่เราอยากได้ไม่สามารถที่จะทำให้เราพอใจแบบถาวรแบบตลอดอยากได้ครั้งหนึ่งก็ต้องอยากได้อีกครั้งหนึ่งถึงจะได้สิ่งที่ต้องการจิตจะไม่นิ่งสงบหรอกมันจะอยากได้อีกความโลภไม่มีสิ้นสุดนัตถิตัณหาสมานาทีตัณหาความอยากได้ไม่มีสิ้นสุดยิ่งอยากก็ยิ่งยากไปเรื่อยๆไม่มีจบแต่สติรู้เห็นมันก็แค่นั้นรู้สภาวะมันไม่เที่ยงมันทุกข์มันไม่ใช่ตัวตนจะเริ่มถอยจากความอยากจะเริ่มเบื่อความโลภก็จะดับลงความหลงจะหายไปด้วยวิชาความรู้ที่เห็นสภาวะมันก็แค่นั้นมันไม่เที่ยงมันทุกข์มันอนัตตาคือสิ่งที่จะทำลายความหลงก็คือความรู้ที่เกิดจากสติกับปัญญาของเราในเบื้องแรกเราก็ต้องฟังธรรม ฟังธรรมแล้วก่อนพิจารณาธรรมอันนี้จะทำลายความหลงในระดับหนึ่งแต่จะทำลายความหลงลึกๆเราก็ต้องปฏิบัติด้วยฟังแล้วน้อมนำเข้ามาในจิตใจแล้วก็ปฏิบัติให้มีสติรู้ทันความโลภเกิดจากความหลงความโกรธก็เป็นความหลงขณะที่เราโกรธเรานึกว่าเราถูกแล้วเราควรจะโกรธเพราะเขาทำไม่ดีสิ่งที่ไม่ดีเกิดก็เราเกิดความไม่พอใจเราหลงนึกว่าเราควรจะพอใจในเหตุการณ์อย่างนั้นยึดว่าฉันถูกเขาผิดแต่นี่คือหลงเพราะเรากำลังทุกข์อยู่เรายังไม่เห็นแต่ถ้าเราตั้งสติพิจารณาอาจจะเห็นความโกรธก็เป็นความทุกข์เราจะพยายามละให้ได้เพราะมันเป็นความทุกข์ก็เลยสิ่งที่เรายึดคืออะไรเรายึดขันธ์ห้าของตนกายเวทนาสัญญาสังขารวิญญาณขันธ์ห้านี้เรายึดว่าเป็นเราเป็นของเราอันนี้คือความหลงเพราะสิ่งเหล่านี้ไม่ใช่เราไม่ใช่ของเราไม่ใช่สัตว์บุคคลเป็นสภาวะที่เปลี่ยนแปลงตลอดเวลาและมันไม่ใช่ตัวไม่ใช่ตนท่านก็เลยให้ตั้งสติพิจารณาบ่อยๆจิตจะค่อยๆถอนจากความหลงแล้วความรู้แจ้งในความจริงจะเกิดขึ้นแทนถ้าทำไปเรื่อยๆก็จะถึงจุดหนึ่งที่ความหลงก็หายไปหมดจากจิตใจ The question was about delusion. What is delusion? And how does delusion manifest in our experience? Is it attachment? And is the way to deal with delusion to let it go, to abandon it, let it go? Well, yes, it is. There's many kinds of delusion, many levels of delusion. On the deepest level, we say delusion is coming from avijja, ignorance of the Four Noble Truths, not knowing what is suffering, its cause, not knowing the end of suffering, not knowing the path of practice that leads to the end of suffering. This is what, not knowing these things is what feeds delusion. Where is delusion manifesting? Well, in this body, we are deluded, we believe and have the view this body is belonging to a self or is a self. That's attachment. We attach to the body as self, we attach to our feelings, memories and perceptions, our thought formations and sense consciousness as self. These five khandhas are the basis for delusion. We attach to them and then we suffer because of them, because of that delusion. But if we establish mindfulness and investigate this whole process by which delusion leads to suffering, we can start to unpick it, unravel it, expose it, witness the truth, observe the truth, and delusion starts to be reduced and suffering starts to be reduced. And you realize it, so then you want to reduce your delusion all the more because you know it's good for you. You'll suffer less. The less deluded you are, the less suffering you have. And delusion underpins both greed and hatred. So it's really the fundamental mental defilement, the fundamental cause of suffering in our mind. We're deluded about everything. But because delusion by its name is deluding, we miss it, we don't see it. It's like this kind of background noise that we miss all the time that's there, but it keeps causing us suffering. So we have to look carefully, we have to examine carefully with mindfulness, with wisdom. And we, little by little, can recognize delusion, catch it, and let it go. Delusion comes up with wrong views. So maybe even the thought the Buddha was not enlightened, but the Buddha doesn't know all these Four Noble Truths, they don't make sense, it's not true at all. That's delusion, isn't it? Or the delusion that says don't need to practice Dhamma, I'm fine, life is good. That's a delusion, and maybe when the conditions are right you don't see it, but later when the things change, then your delusion is exposed. You know, when you fall ill, or you start to get stressed about your work, or you have a relationship problem or a money problem, and then the delusion of attachment starts to get exposed. So suffering is often where delusion is being revealed to you. Where there's suffering there must be attachment, and where there's attachment there must be delusion. So a lot of our Dhamma practice is about observing, looking, learning, finding out from our experience. But the Buddha saved us a lot of trouble by giving us a framework, the Four Noble Truths, and a pathway, the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. So he saved us a lot of time. And he said, well look, you can use this framework, this structure to help understand your experience better. So sometimes just hearing it, hearing the Dhamma already removes delusion in that very moment. So listening to the Dhamma will help as well. So those are the questions for tonight, and we'll wish you well with your practice.